Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to another edition of Metabolic Wellbeing Without the BS. I'm your host, Martin Gillespie, and we have an amazing human being all the way from South Africa today. Herna de Wit, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Martin. Thanks so much for having me on this. I'm really excited to share everything with you.
It's a pleasure having you here, but I want to ask you a very, very important question on this specific day that we are recording. What does metabolic health feel like for you, and how are you amplifying that in your daily life?
Okay, so I think this is not a simple question to answer. So to me, it represents the optimal functioning of your body's metabolic processes. So this includes everything from efficient conversion of food to energy, and then effective regulation of blood sugar levels, balanced management of hormones. But then we need to consider your energy levels, your moods, and your healthy weight. So for me, the four most important things that we need to consider when looking at metabolic health is definitely balanced blood sugar levels. You want to avoid those blood sugar spikes and crashes that can lead to fatigue and cravings. Then all of us want efficient energy production. We want to ensure that our body has a steady supply of energy during all our daily activities. Then a thing that I think is mostly skipped during consultations with your GP or with any other health coach is your optimal hormone levels. Now I'm thinking about men and women here, but I'm not talking about sex hormones. I'm specifically referring to insulin, which is linked to your sugar metabolism, leptin, which is released by your fat cells, and then also your cortisol. Now, this guy is your stress hormone, and this is very important in today's life. And then the fourth thing for me is definitely your microbiome, and specifically your gut microbiome. Now, if you support your digestion and your nutrient absorption, all of these other functions, your blood sugar levels, your energy production, and your hormone levels will already get a boost. So it's also important to know that metabolic well-being, we need to consider it happens in every single cell within your body. And it's influenced by your environment and your lifestyle choices. You can't have effective metabolic health by not looking at your environment and not looking at your lifestyle choices.
There are so many pieces of gold there, and I'm going to dig down in quite a few of them. But before we proceed with that, can you explain to the listeners who you are and why you are a leading authoritative figure in this space?
Okay, so I have studied biochemistry and human physiology. That was during my undergrad. I've done an honors in biochemistry, and there I was very lucky to start working on DNA research. And that specifically led me into epigenetics. So just as a quick background for epigenetics, that is how our environment actually affects our DNA. It doesn't change our DNA, but it does turn certain genes on and off, whether it's harmful genes or genes that are actually helpful. And then after my honors in biochemistry, I decided it's time for a bit of a shift, and I did bioinformatics and computational molecular biology. So that helps me to understand where drug design comes from and how molecules interact with each other. But I didn't want to stay in the computational field because I'm not very good with the coding aspect of it. So I then came back to Johannesburg because I moved around a bit in South Africa during that time. Came back to Johannesburg, and I went back to my first passion, which was epigenetics, and I did my PhD in epigenetics. And then after that, I did a very short stint as a postdoctoral fellow, where I did bioinorganic chemistry. And that was, again, how drugs interact with DNA, how it stops the DNA replication process. And after that, I was very lucky to land in a longevity science company that was based in Southeast Asia, where I got to work with amazing companies, corporate individuals, and help them, coach them through how to optimize or try and boost their performance. So you can call it lifestyle interventions, you can call it biohacks, whatever you like to call it. It was these little nuggets of information that they could use during their everyday life to improve themselves.
You've incredible background. Two key things, epigenetics and longevity. Longevity seems to be one of the words that has popped up over the last 5 years, counterbalanced with health span. Do you want to give your thoughts on the differences between health span and longevity?
Right, so you keep on seeing these figures popping up every now and then in every longevity presentation, where you have your lifespan. Now, our lifespans keep on increasing, whether it's to 80, 85, 90 years, hopefully to 100 and more. But health span comes in where you try to get your healthy years to be as much as possible, so your sick years are as little as possible. Now, health span directly links in with longevity, because longevity is getting someone to live longer, but healthier.
Now, that's an incredible space, because when you look at here in the Western society, we have that corporate working environment that you retire at 60, 65, 68, around those ages. But you may live to your 84. But there is a massive decline in people's health. Why, in your opinion, is there a decline in people's health as we age?
Well, there should actually not be a decline with the medical advancements that we have.
That's a big statement.
Yes, there should not be a decline. But unfortunately, with our lifestyles, with our food choices, with our decline in movement. Now, think about a corporate person. They sit for at least 8 hours. Then after that, they go home, sit some more, watch Netflix. I'm thinking about individuals that worked with my dad 30, 40 years ago. They are not healthy now. Besides that, they worked for a big cigarette company, but that's not the point. So now we see a lot of them sit with cardiovascular problems, metabolic issues like insulin resistance, like type 2 diabetes. And that all comes from their lifestyle choices that they made in that 30 or 40 years that they worked as corporate individuals. So I feel, and I have a real big desire to help educate individuals so that they know what they can do to prevent certain chronic conditions later in life, or just at least postpone it a little bit.
Now, I want to go back to your first question, the first questions and first part of this conversation. You mentioned quite a few things: energy levels, balanced blood sugar, fatigue, efficient energy. I did notice that you missed out one of the superpowers that I believe in, is that we ignore a hell of a lot: the critical importance of sleep.
Yes.
Why is sleep so kind of blasé, if that makes sense?
Yes. So yeah, I just want to mention before I go into sleep is that if you think about when you were in hospital, or when anyone is in hospital, there's these different medical specialists that keep on coming in, whether it's for your bloods, if you go in for a knee operation, there's always a few doctors that's even looking at you. It's ridiculous, but it is. And I think a few of my medical friends will be quite offended with me now. But I think that is the wrong way to go about medicine and go about health. We need to have a more realistic and more holistic approach. So that is where we need to look at nutrition, definitely starting with what you eat, your physical activity, your stress management, and then very, very importantly, something that we always skip, and what you just mentioned, is sleep. Now, what we keep forgetting with sleep is there to help us recover and restore from the day before. Just a simple thing that we can use to actually measure whether our sleep is efficient is our HRV, which is your heart rate variability. That is a measure of your recovery. Now you want that marker to be as high as possible. And then your percentage of deep sleep and your REM sleep, because that is the two specific stages that you recover in. And I don't like this idea of mentioning that your brain gets flushed from the toxins, but at least your brain gets that recovery period. So with individuals not sleeping as much as they should, and even if they do sleep their 8 hours, you should go and look at the percentage of deep sleep and REM sleep. It's never what it should be. So yes, you are correct with saying that sleep is not being prioritized.
Because one of the many things, and I'm sure you've seen this with a lot of the people you've worked with, oh, my husband or my partner snore all the time. I can't get a good night's sleep. Or, a thing that is becoming quite common is irritable leg syndrome at nighttime.
Mm-hmm.
These are underlying root causes of a metabolic dysfunction happening in that individual. If you have the markers that you can't sleep properly or you have restless leg, in your opinion, and you've mentioned there about epigenetics, what is it in your environment that you could potentially change to help them?
Well, Martin, there's a few things, and that actually starts with the moment you wake up. So I've heard now on many podcasts that just not looking at your phone the first thing in the morning, because that creates that first initial cortisol spike that you don't want. I've read about not drinking coffee first thing in the morning. I've struggled a bit with this myself, so I've swapped over to decaf. It's not as good as normal coffee is. But then while you drink your coffee or while you drink your glass of water, go outside. If you have a space where you can be outside, just to get 5 minutes of sunlight, because that helps with your melatonin production again, which is a very important sleep hormone that regulates your circadian rhythm. You can put in another sunlight session, another 5 minutes later on during the day. Let's say 4 or 5 p.m. or 2 hours before the sun sets, wherever you are. Another thing that is very important is what you eat before you go to bed. Now, I always suggest that you don't eat any heavy meals, or preferably nothing at all before you go to bed, hopefully within the 3 to 4 hours. So let's say I go to bed at about 10:30. I stop eating at 5 o'clock, 5 p.m. That is my last meal, because then I know my digestive system won't be active when I'm in bed, because that digestive system, it keeps you going, and there's still this interaction between your brain and your intestines that keeps saying, I need to be active, need to keep on processing this. So that for me is the main aspect. Then you also get interventions like writing down your to-do list so that you don't think about it during the night. Having something next to your bed that if you wake up and you remember something, you can immediately write it down. That's called brain dumping. It's an amazing technique. But to me, it's again, you need to switch on the light. So in order to write, and then you again disrupt your circadian rhythm. So I think it's again, what works best for you. But if you get the basics right, that's sun exposure, decreasing cortisol spikes, and then darkness or close to darkness when you sleep. I think you halfway there already.
I think I'm going to add one of the things that I see so many executives doing, and I'm talking more about the executive who is traveling an awful lot here. They have their mobile phone charged next to the bed.
Yes.
Get the mobile as far away from your head as possible. Eliminate it from your bedroom, but when you're traveling and you might be in a hotel room that isn't that big, put it on a desk away from you, if you can. The other key thing that you mentioned, actually, which I really want to draw down on, is insulin and its friend type 2 diabetes. Insulin is something that doesn't just happen in your body. You don't wake up at the age of 45 with insulin resistance. Like you don't wake up at the age of 60 with Alzheimer's, right? Why is it that insulin and type 2 diabetes is almost regarded as a little disease, if that makes sense? People don't take it that seriously. Oh, it's only insulin resistance, or it's only type 2 diabetes.
Yes, and that is the sad reality that we are currently in, because it is so common now for someone in the family to have type 2 diabetes. We just skip across insulin resistance. We don't even diagnose that. We just say that, yes, someone has been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. Okay, well, moving on with the next thing. Now, this actually hits really close to home for me because my dad had type 2 diabetes. And yes, it was completely due to his lifestyle choices. Now, the thing with type 2 diabetes is it's almost, I don't want to say it's like cancer, but it has the same effect later on during the disease.
Actually, can I stop you there? I'm going to say type 4 diabetes is cancer. Type 3 dementia, type 4 is cancer.
You are completely correct. Yes.
And if people don't start realizing that if you've got type 2 diabetes, you're shortening your lifespan by 15 to 20 years, but you're encouraging other comorbidities to come into your body.
Yes, 100% with that. Just taking my dad as an example. So it started with type 2 diabetes. Then it went over to cardiovascular issues. So he had a triple bypass, and then he had 2 strokes. And then after that, he had kidney failure. So that is eventually on his death certificate, that is what says it was kidney failure. But it wasn't kidney failure. It started with type 2 diabetes. And everything starts with your lifestyle choices. And I keep on coming back to your lifestyle choices because type 2 diabetes is caused by high carb, high sugar intake, processed foods, which then causes inflammation in your body. And because of that inflammation in your body, you get all these other comorbidities that start to come out, like cancer, like your cardiovascular disease, like kidney disease.
Question for you. Obviously, early detection is a massive, massive component. But in your experience, can type 2 diabetes be reversed?
I think, or from my experience, what I've seen with a few clients is that you can get it to a point where it's not a big concern anymore, where you don't need to worry about comorbidities. So that is the first step that you want, just to be as healthy as possible.
I would actually go as far as to say there is a phrase that a lot of medical practitioners will use and say, they'll never say that you're cured for cancer, for example, but it's manageable.
Yes.
Now, type 2 diabetes can be, the biomarkers can be reversed and can be managed by that individual with the support of a good network of health practitioners around them.
Yes.
And if you get to the root cause of, if it's smoking, if it's poor food, if it's a lack of sleep, and the things that you were saying there about too much cortisol, they're huge. I want to draw down on a bit about cortisol, because cortisol, or more commonly known as stress, in your experience and in your academic experience as well, what does stress do to the body?
Well, the first thing that you have to know about stress is it increases inflammation. So the problem with inflammation is it causes a cascade of problems. So just to give you a little bit of background on what I specifically went through with stress and how I got through it. So I was diagnosed with trigeminal neuralgia in 2021. So it was mid-pandemic. It was a high stress time for everyone. And just for those who don't know exactly what trigeminal neuralgia is, that is where the nerve in your face that's that starts at your ear, it branches into three. So it goes above your eye, into your cheek, and then into your jaw. Now, that specific nerve was inflamed or damaged due to my high stress levels. Now, the problem with this is it is chronic and severe pain. The only way to get chronic stress, now I specifically mentioned chronic stress, because chronic stress is the bad stress. If you have short bursts of stressful events, let's say you are excited because of going to a specific event, that is good stress. That is that energy boost that you need to get through the event. That's perfectly fine. But if the stress becomes chronic and ongoing, that is where you need to start focusing on stress management techniques. So something as simple as breathing exercises, meditation before bed, or to me, the most interesting stress management technique currently is to stimulate the vagus nerve. What is interesting about this nerve is the longest cranial nerve that you have in your body. It connects your brain directly with your intestines. So it goes through your heart, not through your heart, but next to your heart, your lungs, and to your intestines. And when you stimulate this, you stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system. Now, with that, you stimulate a slower heart rate, and it promotes relaxation. Now, simple techniques, just like sighing. So literally just a sigh. That helps stimulate the vagus nerve. Simple techniques like that will help you reduce your cortisol levels, help you reduce the inflammation, reduce the chance of developing something like insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, and all the comorbidities that go with it. And that is especially important for corporates because of their high stress environments.
Before we go into corporates, how's your health now? Because obviously that wasn't that long ago. That was only 3 years ago. How have you managed that, and what lessons have you learned personally on this journey?
So, Martin, I went to a few doctors to get it firstly diagnosed and then to get it treated. The first few gave me cortisone, which again doesn't help with your metabolic health. And then eventually I landed up with a doctor who said that I should start with Botox injections even, just to try a different therapy. Now, I'm extremely scared of needles, so that was definitely not an option for me. And then, thank God, I landed up with a doctor it was an Indian doctor, and she told me, well, you need to start managing your stress with breathing exercises and with yoga and meditation. And I first thought, I can't really believe this, because I mean, I'm coming from a hard science background where there's either a pill or treatment for it, not a lifestyle intervention. And then I started working with this longevity science company where we started giving these interventions to corporates. And I saw how it worked for them. And that is where I started with my breathing exercises, normal box breathing, meditation before bed, like a 5-minute session. And then with my favorite, the vagus nerve stimulations. So just those short interventions or biohacks throughout the day. I didn't block out 30 minutes, 60 minutes during my day to get this sorted out. Every time when I started feeling anxious or I started feeling a bit more stressed, do a 2-minute breathing exercise, automatically feel better, and the pain reduced. And then I kept on doing this. It's about almost 6 months now that I haven't had any pain.
That's incredible. And I also like the time scale that you put on it as well, because it is common. As soon as you go and you think there's something wrong, there's an array of medical practitioners that will get involved. But it does take time to reverse any type of inflammation that is in your body. Being kind to yourself during this journey is bloody hard as well.
Yes, it is, because we are living in a time where we want everything as quick and easy as possible. So I want to mention that I think that is where the terminology of biohacking or hacking your health, it's good, but we need to understand that if I do one breathing exercise, it's not going to make me feel less stressed. You need to be consistent and disciplined in whatever you do. Whether you want to improve your sleep, your nutrition, your fitness level, your stress management, it needs to be consistent and disciplined from your side.
You've mentioned a couple of times the power of nutrition. And there is so much health information out there on the power of nutrition. All you do is an internet search and you'll get screens of it. And it is extremely overwhelming. What would be the first steps that you would advise people to really look at from a nutritional point of view?
Okay, so first steps for me is cut down on your sugar intake. Sugar is directly linked to inflammation and to a whole bunch of metabolic conditions. So if you cut your sugars and your refined carbs, you are already a good step ahead. Now, another important thing is, yes, some few foods are being marketed as whole foods. It's great, but do you really know what is in it? So if you eat things that are as close as what it was in its natural form, that is the best way to go. So whether it is meats, don't eat processed meats. I'm not very concerned about red meat versus white meat. Doesn't matter to me as long as you get your protein source. And then fibers. Fiber is very, very important, specifically for your gut microbiome. Now, here I want to say that if your gut microbiome is not balanced, your digestion and your nutrient absorption will not function efficiently. So then it doesn't matter what you eat, how many times you eat it, what your macros look like. Your nutrient absorption is off because of your gut microbiome. So your fibers are extremely important, and that you get from your vegetables. And I think here you are not going to completely agree with me on the vegetables.
So I'm not anti-vegetable here, right? I've been carnivore for about 4 years. And it worked for me, but I am with you. I am a big advocate of a low carb / ketogenic lifestyle. I do sometimes eat vegetables. If I went to your house and you put vegetables out there, I would eat them because I know that they're made from love, and I know that you would source them from good quality. So I choose not to eat them, and it doesn't do me any harm. But I also agree with you around good natural protein is essential, whether that be from the sea or from the land. These are critical building blocks for your metabolic health. And interestingly, you're like most of the guests I have on the podcast. We talk about the gut microbiome and we talk about brain health, but there is a massive area that is just getting to the mainstream, if you want to call it, not mainstream media, but mainstream conversations on biohacking. And that's important. When you eliminate the sugars and the ultra-processed foods, your oral microbiome improves dramatically.
Yes, it does. And again, that is because sugars cause gingivitis, inflammation. And I again keep mentioning inflammation because it's inflammation in your mouth and your digestive tract. Because sugars go and they feed the bad bacteria or the bad microbes within your digestive tract. So when you keep on feeding the bad bacteria or microbes, the proportion of good bacteria that you want in your gut, they decrease. So then you get all these metabolites that are produced by these bad gut microbes, and that affects your mood, your energy levels, your hormone production. So yes, you are completely right with as soon as you stop using or inputting as much sugar, your gut bacteria, they improve.
The bit where we haven't actually spoken about, which I think is really critical as well, is the importance of good natural fats. Now, it also, women need different fats from men. I want to ask you a question, and I would love your opinion. We'll hold facts over here just now. What are your thoughts on intermittent fasting?
So I think, or I believe that men and women need to approach intermittent fasting differently. And that is simply because men have a 24-hour cycle. So you get up, your energy levels go up and down throughout the day, go to bed, not a problem. But women's cycle is 28 days, roughly 28 days, some 35, some shorter. But there we need to consider that during your period or your menstruation cycle, that is when your metabolism will be higher. You do need more calories. So I also eat an intermittent fast. I absolutely love it. And that is simply because I've realized my digestive system works better when I intermittent fast and my energy levels are better. But it is an absolute nightmare when I fast during my period. And that is simply because my hormones don't allow me to. So during the week before and let's say 2 days after, I definitely don't fast.
I'm so glad you brought that up because that also relates to the earlier conversation around cortisol and hormonal health. And I've seen a lot of women trying to get onto that trend, let's do intermittent fasting, and don't really pay attention to the natural cycle of their body. And that can cause a whole area of things, and it can have a massive negative impact on their health. And also if they've got a respective partner, they need to understand if you've got a relationship with, if you're a male and you've got a relationship with a woman and it's a cycle, don't pressurize her into fasting. Learn about it. And that's where I would also advocate, that's where the joy about health coaching comes into it as well. we find out around those critical pathways that, okay, let's not do intermittent fasting on those sort of 10 days, as you've alluded to, sort of week before, the week of your period, and a couple of days after, that your hormones are out of sync. Not out of sync, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Well, guys, we can do it at any time. And the one thing that I would say with guys around doing intermittent fasting, you potentially will see faster weight loss happening. And again, if you've got a relationship with a, with a woman, and she'll be like, how come you're losing all the weight and I'm not? Be patient, it will happen if that's your goal.
Yes, yes, completely agree with that. And it is very frustrating as a woman, because as soon as you start seeing, but other people are losing weight quicker than me, why is that? But yes, again, discipline and consistency and patience and being kind to yourself is very important here.
We mentioned also intermittent fasting and the aspect of good, healthy fats. Now, there's been brilliant work over the last few years with a wonderful range of people around fat does not make you fat. In your opinion, when we talk about healthy fats, what does that mean for you?
Okay, so as soon as I hear anything about healthy fats, I immediately think not anything seed related. If it is sunflower, whatever else, I'm not touching it. I'm very stringent on fats and the oils that go into anything that I eat. And this is simply because of cholesterol levels. I really want my cholesterol levels to stay as optimal as possible. So I opt for something like olive oil. And that is, for me in South Africa, it's the most affordable, easily to come by. So I keep on using olive oil, stay away from seeds.
Do you use other fats such as butter, ghee, tallow?
Yes.
Avocado as well. I mean, avocado in season is actually really nice. But you sometimes have to wonder, if you're in South Africa and I'm in the UK and it's avocados from Peru, you kind of go, well, how really good are they and how ripe are they? So you have to be really mindful of where you're sourcing any oils. And that's where
Yes.
butter comes quite handy. It's from the dairy. It's generally local as well.
Yes. And it's also very easy to make your own butter, which I really enjoy. So it's definitely butter to cook in. But then I'm still on the fence about whether, for me, coconut oil is healthy or not. Because this is where the mouth microbiome comes in. I do the whole brushing my teeth with coconut oil because I believe it helps with my microbiome, but I don't cook foods in coconut oil. So again, little bit of a personal preference coming in. So I'm still leaning more towards butter, olive oil, avocado oil is perfectly fine.
So actually, I want to take you up on that point. One key area we spoke there about oral health. There is an abundance of toothpastes out there. And there's toothpaste. You mentioned there you use coconut oil. I use lemon and bicarbonated soda.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the toothpaste that are available in supermarkets are highly toxic chemicals.
Yes.
It's an area where, as we mentioned about oral health, that is almost kind of forgotten about. What's your experience, and how have you, do you have any experience in this space to sort of advocate, listen, ditch the branded toothpaste and go back to natural stuff?
Okay, so in my personal experience, I've used fluoride-rich toothpastes. I've used the whitening toothpastes. I've used a few different brands, used from the cheap ones to the more expensive ones. And for me, I'm getting a better result with coconut oil. And that is simply, it helps whiten my teeth. I haven't had cavities in a few years, and that is due to coconut oil.
I must give it a go, actually. I think I'll give that a go. I'm always keen to know, as you've mentioned the words biohacking, I'm always keen to try out things myself before advocating that to clients, because it's fun, and two, sometimes it might not work for me, but it might work for you. So thank you for that tip on it, the coconut oil one. That would be great. I also have to share with you around the oils type of stuff. Astonishingly, I had a client who explained to me that they make a lot of Indian foods because that's part of their heritage. And I was like, fantastic, because my head was going good natural, it could be goat even, or good lamb and lovely fresh herbs. And I asked them what oil that they use to cook them in, because I was thinking ghee, beautiful nutty flavor. And they said to me, Martin, we use vegetable oil because it comes from vegetables. And I nearly fell off my chair. The myth around vegetable oil, you mentioned there about non-seed oils, but it's very heavily marketed as vegetable oil. That is causing rust. As soon as you put it to any part of your inner body, it's rusting your insides.
Yes, and here I need to mention that I really have a very big concern and a big problem with the marketing. So even with olive oil, you get these, oh, it's 100% olive oil. But when you start looking at the ingredients, you see that it's canola oil, sunflower, and it's a mix, and then eventually it's olive oil. So we really need to be considerate of what we put in our food so that we know exactly what is going into our bodies.
I think one of the lessons I'm hearing you saying, which is really critical, is educating yourself on reading the labels. They're tiny, small prints, but if you can start doing that, you will increase your health and well-being to a different level.
Yes, exactly. I've recently been in a local pharmacy, and I saw that there's these little apple cider gummies. Now, I think the marketing on all these gummies are brilliantly done because it's fun. It's an exciting thing to take because I'm taking a gummy as a supplement. But as soon as I turned this over, now, okay, on the shelf, it was marketed as it's a weight loss supplement and it helps to improve your sugar levels, which apple cider can help with. But as soon as I turned the bottle over and I looked at the ingredients, I saw that, yes, it did have apple cider in, but it was fourth or fifth on the list. The first two ingredients were sucrose and glucose syrup. Now, how do you explain that to help with glucose levels? So it is crucial for us to start educating and all our clients on webinars, podcasts, to people need to look at what is in the stuff they eat or consume.
The one area which I have a big personal advocacy around trying to change is your biggest organ is your skin. It's also one of the finest organs that we have in our body, but we abuse it on a daily basis with lots and lots of toxins. And there's certain toxins we cannot control. We can't control the weather, for God's sake. But we can control things like the washing powders we wash our clothes in. And as much as that aisle in most supermarkets might smell great, there are a chemical chaos that's permeating into your skin. And as you sleep, it's permeating into your skin for 8 or 10 hours as you sleep, or 6 hours, and that goes straight into your bloodstream. Kick this stuff out. That's number one when you look at not just the nutritional factor, but lifestyle factors that you can do within your own household. Mm-hmm. Start eliminating, start lowering your toxic load to increase your health span of being healthy. It's not hard.
Yes, but here I want to mention, Martin, that I think when we start mentioning toxins and the toxin load, and you need to decrease that, it is very easy to start becoming very obsessive about what is in your environment. And here we need to remember that we should keep on doing as much as we can. So, for instance, skincare products. Yes, you can take or you can use those that have been proven to contain the least toxins or the least chemicals. But if you can't necessarily do that, just at least look at something from your nutrition side or from your environment side, whether it's an air purifier if you live in a high toxic or high polluted city. So those small changes, it does help and it does compound.
I couldn't agree more. And one of the things that when people are taking the responsibility for their health, it takes a little while just to be kind with yourself at making these changes and tweaking them that works for you and your environment, your sacred space of your home is really important. Because it's not one cap fits all approach. But there are basic principles. Eat real foods. If you are eating vegetables, eat seasonal vegetables. Invest in a slow cooker, or sometimes known as a crock pot. Invest in one of them so that you can buy generally those cheaper cuts of meat, cook them for 10, 12 hours. You'll get the beautiful bone broth, which is natural collagen involved in them. Brilliant resource. And I want to ask you a question actually around a nutritional point of view. What are your views on salts?
Okay, so on salt, I would specifically say that if you buy pink salt, Himalayan salt, if you look on the label again, you can see it's produced somewhere locally. It's not coming from the Himalayas. So use salt. It's perfectly fine. But what you need to know is that if you are someone that's very active, then your salt intake needs to be a bit more. You will immediately know your salt intake isn't efficient enough if you start getting cramps. So when you cramp, you increase your salts, and if that doesn't work, increase magnesium. So it's again a personal thing. You need to experiment and sort out what works best for you, but I'm not preferential to whatever salt. If it's activated charcoal salt, Himalayan salt, normal sea salt, at least it's salt.
It's funny, one of the things that I advocate, you can always, if you're digesting too much salt, it will pass through you. It doesn't stay in your body. It will pass through. You will become, your own intuition will tell you when you've had enough salt.
Mm-hmm.
Or as the phrase is, your gut tolerance level will say, I've had enough.
Yes.
And you play around with it. And as you rightly said, if you're extremely active, you're a runner or a gym junkie, and I mean that in the best sense, you might need more salt because you're utilizing your body at a different level, but you need salt on a daily basis. That's a key critical aspect. Question for you. You're very academic. You've done some brilliant work. If you had a crystal ball, what does health education look and feel like?
Okay, so for me, the ideal, if I could change education, it would be something that is more inclusive. And here I mean people from different educational backgrounds and more comprehensive. So we need to start targeting individuals when they are still children, when they are young enough to be able to know that, well, vegetables are better for me than a deep fried French fry, for example. And this needs to go from children to adults. And we also need educators that are, let's say it's in the medical field. We need educators that are not only medical doctors, but also nutritionists, psychologists, fitness specialists, so that it becomes a more holistic approach to well-being, where we integrate physical, mental, and emotional health into health education. I also think that we are slowly moving away from traditional classrooms where everyone just sits in the classroom or they go and do a few experiments in lab. Very excitingly is now the movement towards AI and virtual reality and augmented reality, because this will create a more immersive learning experience. So even if you don't have the hospital to go do your practical in, or you don't have the lab to do your DNA extraction in, you can do it in virtual reality and you at least get that experience. So when you do land up in a lab or in a situation, you have a better idea of what to do.
I really like that. I like that point around a collaboration of team of people.
Yes.
Because, you know, I see a lot of young kids out, they're fantastic, out playing soccer or out doing sports. That's terrific. But they don't need to go to a fast food place after it. Right? Or they're drinking one of those high energy drinks after it. Might not be the high energy drinks, but it would be something Gatorade, for example, right? Because that's what they want. So you see 8-year-olds drinking this. That's basically a cocktail of sugar.
Yes, sugar and caffeine, and that is not good for children of 8, 9, 10.
You've got some great learnings there. How do people contact you? Because you are a wealth of information.
Well, Martin, they can contact me on LinkedIn. I'm relatively involved on LinkedIn. It is Herna de Wit, and I'm not that active on Instagram yet. And hopefully for the millennials and the younger generations, I'll start posting more on TikTok in the coming weeks.
Hannah, I could talk to you for hours, but I think that what we have covered off today, and thank you also for being extremely open around your personal transition and that of your father as well. That is so great. The power of storytelling with an empathetic heart is part and parcel of what this podcast is groundwork is on as well. But on behalf of everybody from Australia to Scotland to South Africa, thank you so much for the gift of your presence, your wisdom, your wit, and your curiosity. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Martin.